My name is Erin King, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from an unknown author and says, "Your energy introduces you even before you speak." After a serious health scare, three-time entrepreneur Erin King put her entire life on pause. She then spent a full year alongside award-winning PhD researchers to conduct the world's largest study on personal human energy management. Fast forward to today, and Erin is known as the leading personal energy expert. As the creator of the Energy Exam, the world's first scientific assessment for personal human energy, Erin has worked with Google, Disney, the Academy Awards, Visa, Adobe, and even the United States Navy to unlock what she calls their big energy. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to unlock your audacity and embrace bold decisions, the biggest limiting belief holding you back and how to overcome it, why energy is the key to influencing others even before you speak, and how to tune out external opinions and trust your intuition. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So there's a friend or a loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day. Share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with Erin King. Erin, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, James. This is fantastic. So pumped to be here.
Isn't it great? Two Success Magazine speakers together right here. High five, pass the microphones there. This is one of those interviews where I do all the preparation, but I feel like I could just throw my questions away and just see where we go. But the question to kick it off, and your energy is so great, and I love the work you're doing, and just inspiring through example is such a great thing. Who was the very first person to believe in you?
My grandmother, Nana. On the boat from Ireland when she was 13 years old. I'm one of 36 first cousins. Irish Catholics making more Irish Catholics back east. And Nana's always had kind of that big energy. I remember being, young and just seeing her show up so unapologetically. And she had what the Irish call the gift of gab, where she had this phrase she'd always say, "There are no strangers, only friends you haven't met yet." I remember watching her as a kid and just seeing her just light up rooms and, win over a cranky waiter or, help someone in need. And she always inspired me to sort of step into that power. And then, fast forward to middle school, and I'm not sure how it was in Australia, but in the United States in middle school, the game is sort of like play it small, play it same, play it safe. I was none of those things. So I was bullied really bad. And I came home one day, I was bawling, crying, boohooing. And Nana took off this shamrock necklace that I wear whenever I'm on stage, gave it to me and said, "Love, remember, whenever the world comes for you, and they will, it is always better to be someone's shot of whiskey than everyone's cup of tea." And that phrase to me has stuck with me my entire life, where your energy might be too much for someone. It might not be enough for someone. But if the compatibility is not there, that's okay. Because when you double down on who you really are at your essence, that's where you find your people. And that's where alignment really comes in.
That's so good. Can you talk a little bit about that distinction between big energy and high energy, just so people don't confuse that?
Yeah, well, I call it big energy because I've always been called that my whole life. Like people like, "Oh, you drink a lot of caffeine." I'm like, I don't even drink caffeine. My grandmother's even crazier. But, high energy is on a scale from 1 to 7. So my study that I performed is like the 6th or 7th in the last 20 years. And psychologists, scientists have agreed on this 1 to 7 scale. I believe it's because when they're measuring people's energetic barometer, that you can't really land in the middle, right? So 1 to 7 is considered, I guess, the universal energy metric, you could say. So 5 to 7 is considered higher energy. 1 to 4 is considered lower energy. So whenever we're measuring these participants, asking them questions, it's like, well, where are you on that scale from 1 to 7? So high energy means that they are ready to chase the day, win the day. Their batteries charged, ready to rock, they're ready to go. But big energy sometimes doesn't mean that you're someone that has a big James personality or an Erin personality. It's not about matching our energy level or mimicking our style. You have the Australian thing. I'm an East Coast gal. It's not about mimicking or matching anyone else, but it's really about digging in to that best version of you when you really do just feel unstoppable. It's a high stakes moment. It's a moment that matters, a big meeting, whatever. And sometimes you walk in, shoulders are back, heart is calm, mind is clear, and you just know you're going to win the day. Like that's big energy. And I think we all have moments where, you're on fire, like you were so great at the Success Magazine virtual event. I loved your session. But, sometimes I've done a lot of virtual keynotes, and during the pandemic, especially, there's sometimes we're like, you're ST Ruggling, you're not a 7, you're not a 5 or 6, like, because, we can't always be perfect and on. But what I think it's about is like, how do you really recognize what that best version of you looks and feels like and invite them to the party more often than not?
Yeah, people who live an inspired life, I think, is so interesting. So the first time I was ever around people in large volumes who are living an inspired life was when I moved to Boston in 2012. And I met people who had their own businesses. They were aspiring entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who were talking about big picture thinking and how they were going to change the world. And that was just so new to me. Growing up around people in the corporate world and having been in the corporate world for 10 years at that point, it was just such a different energy. And it made me realize people my age and younger who were getting out there and getting after it. And that was an energy that inspired me. Like yesterday, I'm looking at your website, and that inspired me to raise my game in all the different things that you do. So being in an environment, especially for the first time, to make you realize there is an opportunity, there is a ladder that you can climb to increase your energy. It's not about turning an introvert into an extrovert. It's about you showing up as your best self so you can have the life that you want and live that inspired life.
That's perfectly said. Beautiful distinction. And I think that that's really important to put out there, because as thought leaders, as podcasters and creators, oftentimes we want to always make sure that we're honoring that our way is not the way. It's just, we know what we've learned. We're observing what works for others. And for me, I think it's really important to make that distinction, especially if you're a leader or a manager and you're trying to figure out, how do I galvanize my team to like get on board with this new initiative? How do I inspire buy-in at scale? I mean, these are the questions that the leaders that I work with and you as well are constantly asking. And the first thing to kind of keep in mind is what you're saying. It's like, maybe you're motivated by recognition or, monetary rewards, but not everyone gets fired up by the same incentives and in the same way. And that's cool. That's okay. That was one of the big questions I was setting out to answer with this study, is like, how does this translate to being a better leader and to drawing more of that energy out of your team that's their version? I mean, energy is just the capacity to do work, right? It's just how much gas you have in the tank to make it happen, right? And I think that, as we're sort of moving into this age of AI where, let's be honest, like we can't compete with computers on competency. That ship has sailed. But we can compete and win the day on these energy-rich skills. I mean, intuition, adaptability, creativity, we still own those. But that's really the last edge that we have as humans to really double down on. And so as leaders stepping into this, the question is, how do we do a better job at not talking so much about like productivity and time management, which is important, but I think energy management is the new time management. Like your vibe is your value, like your energy is your edge. And so how can you pivot and adjust your style to, looking at, gosh, why is there friction in a collaboration opportunity? Like, why did this brainstorm go so south? Or gosh, why did this person who came on my team that was vivacious and excited, geez, or like some passive aggressive emails, like some questionable emojis, right? Like what happened here? And so I think that kind of like radical curiosity as an energetic leader in today's times is just could not be more relevant than ever.
Yeah, I think people who come from that scarcity versus abundance mindset, the ones with scarcity, they actually reduce the energy that's in the room, because after they complain about all the things that are going on, like they complain about the traffic or politics or all the different things that haven't gone their way.
Yep.
At the end, it's just an awkward silence. There is no energy because it's been sucked out of the room from that scarcity mindset. Whereas the abundance mindset, when people are curious about each other and they're talking about all the great things that they want to do and they expect great things to happen in their life, it creates more energy and people can't wait to just participate in those conversations. It's such a big difference. And immediately in a room, you can find out straight away just looking around. And then, of course, once you have that initial conversation with them, whether someone is part of that good vibe tribe or not.
Yep, totally. And I think what's really interesting, to your point, is this idea about talking about energy at the highest echelons of leadership and success and executive environments. I feel like, my dad was in corporate for his entire life. Like he was Mr. Corporate. And I remember telling him, Dad, I'm doing a lot of work around energy. He's like, isn't that kind of like hippy dippy woo woo kind of stuff? And I think for a long time, Glengarry Glen Ross 90s style, like it probably was. But the more that we're really looking into this and taking it more seriously, talking about things like energy blocking instead of time blocking, talking about, taking the temperature of teams and prospects and clients, it's a fairly new, refreshing conversation. And so my whole goal, James, was how can I put some science behind this and some data so I can have the gravitas to have a conversation with C-levels at Fortune 500s and not get like the eye roll Coachella, woo lemon stuff, not like namaste. It's like, no, the reality is that the highest value experiences and exchanges, they don't happen in low energy environments. They just don't. Like you never have the breakthrough deal or the amazing investor or the high morale, which all leads to productivity, positivity, profitability, doesn't happen when the vibe is off. And so, in my study, we interviewed over 10,000 people all over the United States, aged 18 to 64. And we said, when it comes to a leader that you admire, and we use the word admire because no one wants to really be a follower, right? So it's not who do you follow, but who do you admire? And we gave them 20 options. We're like, is it their killer credentials? They went to an Ivy League school. They know everybody. They have awesome experience. They're really creative, great moral compass. Do they just work more dang hours than everybody? Like, what is it? And the number one answer that we got was it was actually their quote unquote vibe or their way of being. So that's a huge insight as a leader to ask yourself, gosh, when I'm showing up, even if you're time blocked to perfection and you fasted and did your juice and your workout and your meditation and you said hey to your family and you've, blocked everything out and budgeted and you have every box is checked. But when you show up in that moment to get it going where it matters the most, how is your energy actually being perceived? Like, is it magnetizing them or repelling them? Because the other thing we found, which was really interesting, is that 68% of people, so 7 out of 10 people, when they were in a lower energy state, so 1 to 4 on that classic 1 to 7 scale, just by spending time with someone whose energy they admired, we re-interviewed them and their energy actually moved up to a high energy state, 5 to 7, just by being around someone whose energy they admired. So this is kind of a heavy responsibility. If you're a leader, an influencer, a go-getter, ambitious achiever, whatever you want to call yourself, like you have that power and you have that deep responsibility for like, what kind of energy are you going to bring into every room, space, stage, or podcast studio that you have the opportunity to be in? Like that is 100% up to you.
Yeah, I've experienced that so many times in my life. Sometimes you don't even realize you're in a little bit of a slump until you go and have a coffee or you catch up with someone and you leave and you're like, oh my God, I feel energized. And in those times, at least for a couple of weeks, sleep doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money's in your pocket. It doesn't matter where you're working from. You wake up and you get after it because you have that inspiration.
Yeah.
It can't always last forever. Like a big theme on the podcast is doing those mundane reps behind the scenes to build your business when no one's watching is very, very important. But just making it a habit of catching up with just high-level thinkers and doers, the people who see the world without limits and who have that will to win. I agree with that 1,000%. I think it's so interesting.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Absolutely.
How did you secure your first corporate clients? You've worked with some of the, the most renowned companies in the world.
Well, first of all, I was a terrible employee. So start there. So I started off, my very first job was in Baltimore, Maryland. Picture Anchorman meets The Wire, if either of those references land for anybody. But I was smiling and dialing. Okay, just to warn the audience, nothing in this sentence is remotely relevant in 2024. I'll say it anyway. I was cold calling on a landline from the Yellow Pages to go present a PowerPoint presentation in person to local businesses to have them write a paper check to be on broadcast television for advertising. Literally nothing about that sentence is even real anymore. Like I'm 100 even saying that.
The Stone Age, yeah.
Totally. But I mean 100 cold calls a day for 4 years. I was rejected like 8,964 times. Literally, I did the math. It was the best training of my life. It made me so bulletproof because it's like, shoot your shot and move on. I encourage people to invite that level of rejection into their lives as soon as possible because it really does give you that armor and that confidence. And to me, it brought a lot of joy in the journey, truthfully. So I started that. I did pretty well. I met a bunch of very interesting big brands. We did a lot of trade shows, went to kind of like, the big CES trade show in Vegas, this and that. Long story short, when I was 25, I was up for a promotion against this guy named James. And I had better sales numbers, but he played golf with the boys club. So James got the promotion. And I had just watched Jerry Maguire recently. And I literally did a full-on impetuous 25-year-old stupid move. Jerry Maguire. I was like, I'm out of here. This is BS. Who's coming with me? And of course, no one was coming with me because I was 25 and I was an idiot.
Dorothy Boyd, thank you.
I did not have a Dorothy Boyd, sadly. But, that's when I actually started my very first company. I was 25. We were building websites and made every mistake in the book. I ended up putting $70,000 of, which I don't know how I got that much credit card, like runway, but I actually was getting cash advances on my personal credit card to pay for my employees that had kids. I had to shut it down within 18 months. It was an expensive, exhausting, painful, huge punch in the face of the realities of life. I went back to corporate, worked in corporate for 5 years. I started a social media program for a big company called auction.com. They're kind of like an eBay of real estate. We sold $20 million of real estate on Facebook, which was very revolutionary back then. And I parlayed that into my social media agency, which actually started very small. So kitchen table, I had one unpaid intern that I met in a dive bar down the street. And we had some local clients, they had champagne taste and a beer budget, really brutal. We worked really hard. And then I got my big break. I gave myself like 2 more months. And I was like, if we can't land some momentum here or a client or something, it's time to just admit that, there's no shame in the corporate game. But the idea is you play it the whole way through, right? It's hard to jump in and out of that. And so for me, I was like, I'm giving myself 2 more months. And my grandmother had this phrase growing up, and she used to always say, when you're working hard, your head's down, you're focused, the stars will align. The stars will always align. And so that was my mantra. Like I was running, stressed out, the stars will align. So I ended up sending a cold message on LinkedIn to, funny enough, this woman who I am having lunch with today after this podcast at 1:15. I haven't seen her in 2 years. Totally random. But she was the executive producer of the largest entertainment show in the world, the Oscars here in Hollywood. And I just sent her this message about, how cute her dog was and how the Oscars were too long and they should do this like second screen experience where backstage we can see what Brad Pitt and George Clooney are actually talking about because we can be on our phones and watch the broadcast. It was like 4 hours back then. It was too long. So she gave me a meeting just down the street from where we are right now. And one led to another, ended up landing a contract with the Oscars. And I hired all my friends. We beat out big agencies from like, LA and London and New York. We had no idea what we were doing. We worked our butts off, but I just kept being like, the stars will align. Just keep showing up. Stars will align. Well, the big day comes. We're on the red carpet and I have my headset and my clipboard. I'm like working like crazy. It's all happening. And this selfie goes viral with Bradley Cooper and Ellen and Julia Roberts and Brad Pitt. And it broke the internet back then. It was like 2013, 2014. Broke the internet. It wasn't my idea. It just happened on my watch, happened to happen. So I got the credit for it. I was like, it wasn't my idea. But just that one break. Oh, and by the way, I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, the words that we use, we have to be so careful. The language that we use, the words that we speak, because I kept saying the stars will align. And the selfie was literally a bunch of celebrities in a line. Like the stars literally aligned. Crazy. So ever since then, I've been like really cautious. I don't say like, oh, that kills me or things like that. Like like language is so specific. The universe is listening to our exact words, right? But that one big breakthrough client, James, I'm sure you had one of these in your career as well. Only takes that one big fish and that one lucky break of working and trying and showing up and failing and getting rejected and taking risks and rolling the dice and being stressed and not sleeping and nightmares and bills you can't pay and all the things, right? But ultimately, you keep showing up. That one big breakthrough, well, we got hired by the Grammys. We got hired by Fashion Week. And then my agency just exploded. And for 10 years, we were like the go-to social media agency for live events. We were acquired 2 years ago. But what I know to be true from that entire experience was, I promise you 100% that we got hired by these bigger brands, not because we were like the smartest or the best. I think they were responding just more to, I know this sounds woo-woo, but like we had really positive energy and we were listeners and we were relationship makers. And it really made me think like, gosh, does the world respond more to our energy than our efforts even sometimes? Because I remember I was like, why did you guys hire us over these fancy agencies? And she's like, whenever I had a meeting with them, I'd look at that meeting on my calendar and I would just sigh. I just didn't want to get in the room with them. And these are the fanciest ad people from New York and fancy schmancy London and, the LA creatives. She's like, but it was just, their energy was so bad. She's like, I would look at them on my calendar and I just didn't want to do it. When I'd see your name pop up, I was like, oh, yeah, I'll go to that meeting. And so I just think whether you're in sales, marketing, whether you're a leader, whether, you're a creative, you're a project manager, at the end of the day, like the way that you do make other people feel in those interactions, in those environments, it's everything. And it's hard to bring your best vibe a lot. I mean, look, life is crazy. And like I am telling you right now, I have had some seasons where if you asked me my battery, I would be like solid 1 to 2. Like I have had drainy seasons of grief and trauma and loss and terrible investments, stupid investments where I backed like 3 apps for 50 grand each in like a matter of 6 months, lost it all within a year, never even got an email. Like I've done some stupid stuff that has really taken me down. My dad got sick 2 years ago, and there's certain things just kind of threatens to take your energy down. It's not like people that come to the table with a high vibe just have an easier ride than everyone else. It's a choice that you make. It's a decision that you choose, because otherwise, like everything that you try and shoot for, your momentum will not activate. You will stay working harder than everyone else, being lower than everyone else. And so that was the whole impetus behind this study, is like, how can we engineer higher vibes on purpose early and often for not just ourselves, but those around us as well?
That stars will align is incredible, isn't it? That's so powerful. And Keith Ferrazzi talks about this idea of that we do business with people we know, like, and trust. All of that stems from energy. It's such a famous quote, but very few people talk about, apart from you, talk about the energy input that's required to go and do that. It's so powerful. We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. That study you did, I feel like, is so interesting. What were the biggest realizations that you had as a result of that study? And how did you change your daily routine as a result?
Ooh, I'm so excited for this question. Okay. So the coolest thing about the study, James, was that in interviewing over 10,000 people, it was very clear there was like 98% of the study was one kind of person. And then there was this 2% group that sort of rose cream to the top above everybody else. And I'll explain what that means in a second. But what was interesting to me was that a very small amount of people actually do the work that it takes to hone the skill of energy optimization. So we call them the big energy beings. We call them the babes for short, BEB. And the babes had 2 qualities that we started to notice over time. The first quality was that they consistently reported having energy levels in that 5 to 7 range more than everyone else in the study. And the second thing we noticed was they reported really high life satisfaction scores, is what we called it. So like someone asking you, hey, James, how present do you feel? How successful do you feel? Do you feel like you've done a good job? Are you excited for the future? Questions like that. And we gave them a score. So these guys scored 90% or higher on like, I have high vibes, but I'm not running around like a crazy person on 4 venti Starbucks. I'm high energy, but I'm also really happy and I'm calm and I'm excited about where I am, where I'm going, right? So we really studied this group in particular. Like, what are they doing that the rest of us aren't? First thing that we noticed is that they did not really use 2 genres of language that the rest of the study used. So the first genre of language was what I call the power through language. This is like the hustle, suck it up, keep swimming, like all the sort of hustle culture, go bro kind of language. They really didn't use that language as much. They also, on the other hand, did not use the other side of the spectrum, sort of that power down language, like I need to recalibrate, I just need to replenish my batteries, unplug. So that language wasn't really in their vernacular. What their language was, extremely self-aware language of how their own battery worked, but also they used a lot of language around what they did before they got tired. So instead of recharging, they were really all about pre-charging. They were about the charge before the high stakes moment, before the Saturday you want to be present with your kids. They were all about, before I go in there, and I know it's going to be a lift, how do I make sure that I can source and create an energetic state where I can be my best for the ones that I care about the most in this moment? And so what they would do was all kinds of different things. I mean, this is where your Instagram list of like a million self-help things come up to play, right? So they were like, we do this, we do that. So I got a little overwhelmed because I don't know about you, but I go to Instagram, I get so overwhelmed by I'm like, oh my God, who has time to like jump in a cold thing? You have to do the red light and then the sauna and then to like juice. Now you can't eat. Now we are eating. Now there's like, it's just so many suggestions for how we show up as our best. I mean, I was kind of feeling good if I got 10,000 steps or worked in a water, and so wellness overwhelm is a big barrier to being as charged as you can. And so what we found in the study was we looked at the different patterns of how people would charge, what would drain them. And what we found was there were really 5 key energy types that people had. Now, why the types were interesting to me was, number one, it gave a really clear shortcut in one word, their fastest path to pre-charging before a high stakes moment. We talked about that in a second. But then the second thing that was really interesting, which I love because I know we're the same age. And so, there's the 40s looking us in the face where we're getting to that midlife scary zone. But what we found was when we looked at the different generations across our study, so we had everyone from boomers down to Gen Z, the way that they energized and powered up, besides the physical, it didn't really vary that much in terms of learning new things, connecting with others, spiritual practices. The variation between all the different age groups wasn't really that different. But when you sorted them by their energy type, like by these 5 types that we kind of surfaced, the differences were vast, like crazy indexing all over the scale. And so the takeaway was like, we really aren't our age. Like we are our energy. Like there were boomers that had like a millennial mindset. There were Gen Z that were like 109 in terms of their enthusiasm for the world. And so it was really interesting to kind of dive in and say like, wow, these big energy beings, they just know what they need for their battery type more than the average bear. They had language about more intrinsic moments, like not so much scrolling away their self-awareness. They use, no surprise here, they use less time on digital devices, but they didn't try to do it all. They weren't like, I have a business partner named Moira, and she is one of those ones who like does all the things I was just making fun of, and it works for her. I mean, she's super fit. She's 47. She's got the energy. Like it's great. For me, that's a lot. Like I can't do all that. But what the big energy beings were more like me. They had sort of their one go-to that they would build into their calendar. They would prioritize, but they did it before their battery ran out. So think of it almost as like electric vehicles. If you're about to go, drive in cold weather, you have to actually charge your battery longer to be able to survive that if you weren't, unless versus like Southern California, LA, right? Like you can just like drive your EV around and you're good. But if you're in Colorado or Utah, they ensure they give you an alert and they're like, hey, you need to actually make sure this battery does not get below 20% and you have to charge it 3 times as long to go through the harsher, colder weather. Well, same thing goes for us. Like with those heavy lifts, the big meeting, the big presentation, those big moments, like we can't just, most of the study, what they would do is they would basically just kind of like power through and hope for the best. The big energy beings would intentionally power up so they could bring their best. Like that was the big distinguishing factor. So for me to answer your question, I have actually built this into my calendar. Every Monday night, I do a sweep of the entire week. And it's like, all right, you're looking through your calendar and you're just paying attention. You're paying attention to the moments on your calendar where you're like, yes, or the moments in your calendar where you're like, oh God, here we go. This vendor, this one again. And it's not good or bad. It's just, your somatic signals are speaking to you. You have these indicators for a reason. Now, of course, as entrepreneurs, high performers, if you're an ambitious achiever, a lot of our calendar, we have to suck it up. I mean, there's certainly an element of that. We have to just do things, podcast episode, whatever number that you're on right now. Like, sometimes you have to just keep showing up because that's just life, right? You got to pay the bills and that's reality. But are there 1 or 2 moments on your calendar? For me, it's usually like 2 or 3 of the week where I'm like, okay, that's going to be a heavy energetic lift. It's the vendor that always has an excuse. It's the team member that's struggling. It's, personally, it's the family member that is going through a heavy energetic, lift where you're kind of their therapist because you love them and that's okay. Whatever it is, I will literally bake in a 15-minute window. I'll put it in my calendar with a loud alarm that just says vibe check. And for me, I don't have this exact same thing that I commit to, but I'll walk, I'll breathe, I'll take a minute, I'll watch Netflix stand-up comedy, something stupid like that, listen to music, just something that allows me just to pause and recalibrate and go in and bring my best. It is not earth-shattering advice. We've heard it before, but we also know that vegetables and sweating makes us skinny. Doesn't mean we do it. Knowing does not equal doing. So for me, putting it in the calendar has changed everything for me. So that's been my pre-charging. The other thing that's really helped me, which is huge, is that a lot of the big energy beings, they were not afraid of no. They were not afraid of boundaries. They were not afraid of undercommitting. They weren't scared of space in their calendars. Very unapologetic. And when you look at some of their answers, sort of your busy badge American, Australian American, knee-jerk reaction might be like, gosh, they sound a little selfish, right? You're like, gosh, it's kind of like all about them, right? But what they knew in these interviews is they were like, I have to prioritize these things for me. Otherwise, even if I time block to perfection, but I show up to the meeting and I'm only firing halfway, or I show up to my kid's birthday party and I'm not even present, like now it's a lose-lose because now I'm not firing on all cylinders and not bringing what they need from me. So it's not selfish. It is prioritizing battery optimization, charging what you need, plugging into your chargers so you can show up, whether it's peak performance or whether it's just peak presence with what matters to you. Like these were the things that they actually do. And so the ultimate headline was, people do live a reality of vitality, but it happens by choice. It's not by chance.
How much energy do you have in the morning?
I'm a morning person.
I'm not.
You're not?
Which is interesting. As someone who runs Win the Day, everyone's like, oh, you must jump out of bed. Whenever I wake up in the morning, all I want to do is close my eyes and go back to sleep.
So what do you do?
I have a process that I follow. Like you with your alarm with Vibe Check, I have these things where I acknowledge that the day is there to be won or lost. I'm going to make the decision to win that day. And then I do something hard, like having a cold shower every single morning. Yeah. And I often look in the mirror and I affirm success, like I'm going to win today. Sometimes I don't say it, but I always think it. And I expect great things to happen. And as a result of that, good things do. But my first instinct when I wake up, my wife is the opposite. She's usually pretty good when she'll just be coming back from Barry's boot camp and I'll be lying in bed. Yeah, exactly. And that process to fall on in the absence of inner motivation is what enables me to have total output at the end of the day, which I believe the real metric of success, as I define it, is total output in the areas that matter most to you at the end of the day, which is very similar to what you would describe a little bit earlier. That's
good. So the habits component that you're talking about, fantastic. Eat the elephant first, get out there. Habits is only part of the equation, though. The other half of the equation is kind of more what you're talking about with your affirmations. It's that mindset piece, right? There are so many drainers in our life that start from right in here. I mean, it's a leftover mindset from being a child. It's an old narrative that you have to ghost. There's so many moments, as you ascend in your career, as you get bigger and bigger with following and fees on stages and bigger clients. Now you're speaking to all these big corporations, these Fortune 100s. Wow, Gary Vee did them last year. Wow, Brendon Burchard did them last year. I don't know about you, but this is what's in my head when I get hired by these guys. And I hate this phrase imposter syndrome. We need a better phrase for it. But that is an extremely draining mindset that is so easy to fall victim to. I know for a fact that a lot of these guys and gals that are at the highest echelons of success, that they also are feeling this element of like, am I ready? Did I prepare enough? Am I big enough for this? Are they going to find me out? All this kind of thing. And I was backstage with, who was it? Who was backstage? I'm going to make sure I get the quote attribution right. I forget who it was. It might have been Brendon. I think it might have been Brendon. And I was talking about imposter syndrome and feeling like, oh my God, 10,000 people. It's all these like really seasoned financial guys. And I'm just this like 37-year-old like chick in pink pants, like, oh my God. And he was like, Erin, he said, the only people who don't experience a mindset of imposter syndrome ever, they are the actual imposters. And I was like, ooh, that's good. So that feeling of am I ready? Am I enough? It just shows that you care. You want to show up. You want to perform at your best. The key with energy management in those high stakes moments, whether you're doing a Zoom call or you're going on a stage for 10,000 people, the key is that peak performance opportunity for your energetic mindset lies in your ability to ground yourself and be radically present. When you are not able to be in that moment where your feet are, that's where your mind is going ahead or it's going behind. And that's when, even if you prepared so hard and you've worked so hard and you do deserve to be there, you're not going to get the response, the impact, the invitation back that you do deserve just because you're not able to ground yourself in that moment. Like our inability to be in our bodies in the moment is our biggest block to our biggest energy. It's the classic advice, but it's so hard, especially today with, these phones but it's so critical for peak performance right now with AI and fake news and filters and media fire hose. Truth is under assault from, I don't care what side of the political table that you're on. It is a biased world on all sides, but energy is that last remaining truth teller. It's the last compass that your clients, your prospects, your team, an audience can trust because your energy is not going to lie. Your energy never lies.
Agree 100%. For someone who's in a rut or they're in an environment around toxic people or just really bad energy in their house or in their job, what can they do to rise above their circumstances?
That's a great question. So when we talk about drainers in your life, we sort of put them into two categories. So think about budgeting your energy like you budget your money. So I call them fixed and discretionary drainers. So your fixed drainers are someone got sick, we had the trauma, you had the accident. There's the things that life's just going to come for you because it's life, right? Then there's the discretionary drainers. And that's the sort of perfectionism or people pleasing or limiting beliefs, all the things that we kind of can control. The first camp you're talking about is a fixed drainer in the form of a person. So that's that interactional exchange. Maybe you're related to them. Maybe you have to work with them. And you can't just be like, I'm going to set you free because you can't. You share DNA, you share a cubicle, whatever. So when that happens, step one, not to be too promotional, but go take the energy exam. Take the energy exam, okay? Because what's really important when you're trying to figure out, like, why does this feel so heavy and so hard and so eye-twitching? Like, why do I feel like I just physically want to be away from this person? Well, it's because certain energy types just aren't super compatible, okay? So if you can't get away from someone in your family or in your job, find out what kind of energy you have and find out what kind they have. This is really, really helpful because you are able to very quickly look at your approach, pivot the way you're speaking, pivot what you're prioritizing, seeing it through their lens. Like, collaboration and creativity and harmony, all these things come from being able to see it from someone else's point of view. But that's really hard when someone's driving you crazy and making you drained, right? So when you know their energy type, there is a super simple shortcut. It's a one-word shortcut that you can literally memorize 5. It's so simple. And if you are with someone in your life that is taking you down, ask yourself, how can I invite more of this into this exchange? It will change your world. So for example, there's 5 types. So kinetic is one of the types. Kinetic people are always in motion. They get energy from like being on the go and moving. So for them, if they are low vibe and they're on your team or in your house and you're just feeling that their energy is off, it's because something is happening where they're too complacent. They don't have enough of a challenge. They need to compete or have a challenge. So if this is a child of yours, you need to give them like a fun, go see if you can get these points by finding this thing in 10 minutes, right? Or if it's someone on your team, this is someone who it's too easy for them. You have to be like, hey, we're going to try to accomplish this, but it's a really tight timeline. That is going to energize them so fast. And you'll see a shift. You'll see the shift happen.
I can see that with my daughter. She's 5
Really?
years old. Go and do this. No, I bet you can't do that within 10 seconds. Done.
Yeah,
and
she's probably
just,
kinetic. Yeah. So the second, I'll do a high level, but second is synergistic. They are powered up by connection. So if it's someone that you have, whether it's a kid reading a book alone in a room versus in a room with others, or if it's someone on your team that's working from home too much in a silo, they need to be with the whiteboard, linking arms at the group lunch because they get powered up from connection. Responsive energy, if you have responsive energy, you are a deep empath, a deep feeler. So if you are low vibe and that person's around you and it's contagious, right? So you're feeling that they're off, now you're off, now everyone's off. They get energy from actually space because they need to process their emotions and their feelings. So sometimes if you're with a responsive energy in your family or in your job and they're like, their vibe is totally off, you might be thinking, gosh, let me go ask more questions. Let me go untangle this necklace. Let's fix this. Let's fix. That's like the opposite of what they need. You need to give them space and time to marinate and digest, and you will see their energy naturally begin to rise back up again. The fourth is generative. So generatives are creatives. So if you have someone and they're stuck with too much process, replicability, this is the way we do it here, and they don't have any room to get wild or create or color outside the lines, you're going to get terrible energy from them. And then finally is rigorous. And rigorous is the easiest because they just want order and process. So if you have a rigorous in your life or in your job and they're giving you just this awful energy, it's because there is chaos going on and they're allergic to it. So it's a fun little shortcut that's backed in science. Like for me, I'm always wondering, like, what's James's energy type, you know? Then I would know if our interview was going bad, I'd be like, okay, he needs to have more creativity. He needs to have more process. I should send the questions in advance, you know? So these are the things you can use to begin to just not be who you are. You're showing up at your essence. You're showing up as who you are, but it's just little insights really into like how their energy works best and how they power up the fastest. And if you can just make little tweaks to how you engage with them, the projects that you give them, the places you go with them, the pivots you want them to make, just a little click of that energetic lens, and they'll start to power back up to that 5 to 7 level, which means now maybe they aren't so bad after all, right?
It's so smart. I often talk about like stacking the deck in your favor, and every situation that you go in, not just with your team, like, you know, if I'm going to meet someone for the first time, or if I'm meeting someone new, or if I'm going to a dinner party, I want to know who's going to be there so I can do a little bit of information, you know, a little bit of research beforehand, just a couple of minutes, find out a little bit about those people. Like you said, energy, what type of things they might be interested in. The difference that it makes in terms of outcome is huge. Connection, all of those things. Yeah, stack the deck in your favor in every single opportunity that could be a game changer for you.
Totally. And you know, the really exciting part about that, James, is that it doesn't mean you have to do all this research all the time on everyone. Because part of the thing that I hear with my energy work is like, gosh, I'm just so tired already. I can't imagine like doing anything else. Well, in our study, it was actually really encouraging because we found that people who did an average of 32 energizing activities a week. So 4 to 5 a day. So that would be like your wife going to Barry's boot camp. That would be you like jumping in the cold shower. So just 4 to 5, call a friend, take a minute to breathe, nothing crazy. But when people, that was kind of their baseline energy, was 32 for baseline energy across all 5 energy types. But when people in the study went above 32, 2 things happened. When they started to like try to change the world and do all the things on Instagram that we see, their energy levels actually went down and their life satisfaction scores plummeted. So more is not more in this case. You don't have to research 800,000 things about each person and do all these things. It's very doable. I mean, we're talking like micro shifts in the way that you think about your individual and interactional energetic results. I mean, it's literally that simple. So that's kind of the part that I found very encouraging for me as a leader, to know that I don't have to do all these extra things. I just need to work a little bit smarter, not harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So true. A big part of, from the outside looking in with what you've been able to build, is your personal brand. I feel like you've done such an amazing job at building your personal brand. What were some of the keys to success for a personal brand, and how have you been able to leverage that to some big opportunities?
Well, thank you so much, because my brand was a hot mess like 3 years ago.
These things always evolve as well,
James.
don't they? Like it could take a long time to be like, wow, all of the stuff that I've gone through, it all happened for a reason.
Oh man, I can't tell you. That is the nicest thing I've heard in ages. Thank you so much.
It looks epic. Seriously. It's like an 11 out of 10.
Thank you so much. I mean, it is so hard to create a clear personal brand. You know, at one point, actually it was about 3 years ago, I was teaching sales, marketing, business leadership, AI, social media, and energy. I had 7 different speeches. As you know, as a fellow keynote speaker, it's a recipe for disaster. And so, I mean, it's funny now because I'm fine. But at one point, I don't know if I shared this with you earlier, but I was on a Zoom call with my team, dude. I did 5 events in 6 days, 5 different topics, by the way, 5 different keynotes. Like just trying to be everything to everyone, right? And not saying no and not having boundaries. I learned that a lot from the study. I was on a Zoom call, my entire team, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I literally could not catch my breath. I couldn't see the people on the Zoom call. I couldn't hear them. And I collapsed. I woke up in the freaking ER, if you can believe it. I looked at my husband. I thought I had a heart attack. I literally thought I was having a heart attack. I had a panic attack. I'd never had anxiety or anything. And it was so scary to be striving for your goals and working yourself, you know, chasing these dreams and being ambitious. And, you know, all 4 of my grandparents came over here as immigrants. So there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves because they went through a lot to get us here. And we want to show them that it was a good choice. We want to, you know, rise above and do great things and make Nana proud. You know, she's the only one left, but she's always so proud because she knows it was all worth it to like make a better life for grandkids, you know? In that moment of working myself and not managing my energy, I realized a big piece of it, I paused my entire business and I had a keynote in Bali. I went to Bali, tacked on an extra week to like do an eat, pray, love thing. I was like surfing and, yoga and shamans, and I got super weird in the jungle. My husband's like, can I go? I'm like, nope. But I had this really wild download. It was like, not to get to California, but it was a blue moon and it was, it was awesome. And I just realized it was like, gosh, people get kind of weird about the word passion, but I was, what am I really, really passionate about? Like AI does not need my help. It's going to grow without me. Social media, I ran it for 10 years. I'm kind of worried that I played such a big role in evangelizing it with so many companies for so long because of the mental health issues and backlash. Went through every single topic, right? I'm like, what is the one topic that I'm talking about that I actually feel can make a difference and make an impact and serve a greater mission than myself? And it was hands down energy. And so once I just did that work to surface it, it was a very expensive year of saying no to a lot of money. I said no to like $500,000 worth of gigs and trainings and opportunities because I had so many micro brands all going at the same time. And it was really hard to say no to that. But I knew if I didn't go all in on one key topic, everyone hates this answer because multi-passionate and multi-hyphenate is so much sexier and more fun and free. But I just knew, I'm like, if I want to become an expert at this, this is all I read about. This is all I learn about. It's all I study. I did this study with the PhDs. This is what I want to know and share and do and be. And when I crossed over the chasm and set free my old books, my old methods, my old trademarks, my old clients, when I had the guts to go with my gut, and it does take guts to go with your gut, set it all free, it was crazy because when I committed to it, then the momentum, the opportunities, the people, it's so wild how much a little bit of discipline can go when you're focused and you're clear and you commit. It's not sexy advice. I ignored it for years. But once I did, now it's very simple to refer me. It's very simple to know what I can offer. So from a marketing standpoint, it's very beneficial to have a clear personal brand. But even so from a service standpoint, if you're only focused on one thing, that's how you get better and better and better. And you can really deliver serious value, which is the fastest way to grow and expand, right? So that's kind of the long story short.
It's so good. The power of concentrated effort. I think you and I spoke about this on the phone the other day after I had those moments in my life when I was just spread so thin among a whole bunch of different things. And I was like, here are some non-negotiables for the rest of my life. I want to do one thing forever. That's it. No more chopping and changing. If it's not win the day or win the day related, I don't even want to be involved in it.
So good.
And two, I want to be the best in the world at it and just commit just to going all in on that. I don't need to figure it out right now. I will figure it out eventually.
Yeah.
And the signs of the universe, which I feel like has been a big theme of our conversation today, happened immediately, like literally the next morning of these things that are three of them actually. I called it I often recall it to my wife, I called it the three miracles of what happened when I went all in on Win the Day.
What happened?
I was on a podcast early morning. I very rarely do any things early morning. But I said yes to this podcast thing and it finished. And the person said, you need to connect with Mark Victor Hansen from Chicken Soup for the Soul. He sold more than 500 million books. And I said, yes, I have been wanting to connect with Mark. I'd be grateful if you could put us in touch. And Mark called me that morning, like literally I'm cooking breakfast and I had to run outside and take this call.
Oh my gosh.
And then Keith Ferrazzi had messaged me. We'd been wanting to connect for a long time. And he was like, do you want to go and do a Barry's Bootcamp workout this afternoon? And I said, yes. So, Keith, through the written word, had been a mentor of mine for many, many years. Relationships have been everything for me. I loved books like Never Eat Alone and How to Win Friends and Influence People from Dale Carnegie, that all stems from. And then the third one, I was sitting there having my morning coffee, reflecting on this, just writing down what three things I was going to do to win that day. And I had a hummingbird come and sit about 12 inches from my face and just flapped its wings for about 60 seconds. And I was like, this is the craziest thing right now. I feel like this thing from nature too. So they may not have been miracles for other people, but for me, they were extremely clear signs. And everything else that has happened in the 2 years or so since that had happened. Mark came and spoke to my mastermind. We've collaborated on so many things together. Keith, about to have him on the podcast for the second time. So many just amazing things have happened as a result of that.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful. And it's interesting. So the secret to your success with that is just having the courage of the clarity to set the rest free, to make that space. And so many people are like, why can't I get my momentum? Where are my butterflies? Where are my, opportunities? And they need a space to actualize.
Yeah.
And creating that space is expensive and it's scary and it's lonely and there's no guarantees. But when you do, I mean, that's exactly what happens. I mean, it sounds so kind of, oh, really? But it's example after example. I mean, it needs a space to grow and prosper and come into your life. I mean, otherwise there's not room for it. And so many times, like my clients are, I don't know what's wrong. You know, we have a sales problem, a leadership problem, collaboration problem, creativity problem. Like, dude, you guys have an energy problem. You need to make space for what you want to make happen. You know, that's beautiful. It's a great story that you have.
Yeah. And when we're involved in so many different things, I think it can be quite daunting to take one or two steps back, to start with a bit of a blank canvas and say, wow, if I'm not called for all these different things, even though you might be driven by impact, you think that your route to having that impact is to be spread thin between dozens of these different things. But to take a step back and say, what are the most important things I need to control? First of all is family, making sure that my energy, which is a huge part of that the family energy is good between me and my wife, between me and my kids, between my wife and my kids. Just every bit of energy interaction is as optimal as it can be for our current state right now. Second of all, am I happy in my career? Because that's the thing that I have the most control over after that first thing. It's going to have the biggest impact on everything else. And that's what it was. It was going all in on that, making a very definite, clear intention. I've been working with Think and Grow Rich and the Napoleon Hill Foundation for so many years, but setting that as a definite major purpose, which is what Napoleon Hill talks a lot about in his work, I have never felt the power more than I did in that moment. And I'm just still feeling it electrified through all of the different opportunities that are just coming my way now, as I know that you've experienced too.
It's so good. It's so good, James. And it's interesting because I feel like, you know, when you look at your trajectory and your success and all these things you just outlined, you know, none of those would be happening if you were in a 1 to 4 energy level. Now, look, things will happen in our lives. Like, I mean, I don't wish it on anyone, but I'm sure I have some 1 to 4 seasons in my future somewhere, right? The truth is, though, that when you think about how you are able to truly wake up every day, jump in the cold shower, do the berries boot camp, get your mind right, affirmations, set yourself up to win the day. I mean, these are the little everyday micro energetic management moments that just invite every opportunity. You don't even have to even chase it. You begin to attract it. It begins to come to you. It's that pull switch of momentum versus that push. And it's just, I mean, it's a win-win all around. And it really is. It's hard to do. I mean, I'll never forget, there's a story I have from my grandfather's funeral, actually, if I can just go to something that sounds low vibe, but I promise it's high vibe. Okay, so at one point between my first company and my second company, I was raising money to do a startup. I had this idea. It was like a Dollar Shave Club, but for women's healthcare. Okay, so we were basically called PMS.com. We were going to ship women's healthcare stuff. Okay, whatever. So I worked on it for like 3 years, and I researched FDA policies and Chinese shipping and back-end CMS management and inventory and all this stuff. And so I was pitching this group of all male investors in Newport Beach, California. It's like 10 dudes around a table, jacked, buff, Newport Beach alpha bros. They like came from a CrossFit, drove in their Ferrari, blaring Kanye, you know. And I had this like Mount Everest pile of tampons in the middle of this like huge table.
A mismatch.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm pitching, and whatever, and they're all like so grossed out. You know, the one guy's face. I mean, I thought if I kept talking, he was this really tan guy named Todd. There's always a Todd. And I felt like he was gonna like barf if I kept talking. Anyway, so, you know, half through the pitch, I realized that like they're not feeling this pitch, right? So the guy looks at me and he's like, Erin, we really like you. Like, we like your energy. We like your vibe. You seem like you have strong leadership qualities. But this whole idea, this whole concept, we're just not really sure. So I remember like I was they had their fate in my hands, basically. And I flashed back to Nana's husband, my grandfather's funeral, which had happened when I was in high school. And at his funeral, I remember watching Nana, and she was trying to process her grief. We have a big Irish family, so it's like storytelling and singing and big personalities and music. It's more like a party than it's not sad. It's very celebration of life. And he lived a really big life. His name was Wild Bill Faulkner. And I heard one story that just I thought of in that moment. One of his friends said when he came from America, he was another poor Irish immigrant in a land full of broke, poor Irish immigrants looking for work. No one would hire him. So his buddy was a bartender at a pub, and he would sort of let him come late at night when they didn't like sell certain food items. He'd pour him a pity pint, the whole thing. So he went in one night and he's looking for work, can't find, he's running out of money. He's literally like not okay. So this really sad looking guy comes in, sits down next to him at the bar, and one thing leads to another. And my grandfather, I guess, starts telling jokes and stories and kind of like lightens the guy's day. The guy starts smiling, laughing, goes to leave. And he's like, hey man, I have to tell you, like, I had a really hard day at work. Thank you so much. You really cheered me up. And my grandfather said, well, at least you have work to go to. Turns out this guy owned a construction company and offered my grandfather a job. My grandfather said, I don't have any skills. I don't know how to do construction. And he said, don't worry about it. The smartest people I know bet on the jockey, not the horse. And I flashed back to that story as I was standing in this room. And I'm usually famous for thinking of the perfect thing to say 30 minutes after the moment has passed, like every time. So I think my grandfather, it was a divine inspiration. I think he gave me the download. And they said, well, Erin, thanks for coming by. You know, again, we like you a lot. We don't really think it's for us, but any other questions before we kind of show you out? And I said, well, thank you for your time. And I finally thought of the perfect thing to say. I think it was my grandfather. And I said, I guess the only question I have left is like, are you the kind of investors that bet on the jockey or the horse? And fast forward, and they signed a 7-figure term sheet to back PMS.com. We were featured in Forbes. We had 30,000 people sign up for it. And it was this moment where I realized that the world really does bet more on who you are at your essence than who you are at your expertise. It doesn't mean you can't learn and grow and sharpen and get better. It just means if it comes to the two head to head, energy and who you are at identity level will win every single time. It's that important.
So good. Agree 100%. Last question before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard that you could show yourself on your worst day?
I am right on time.
Love it.
So I always worry about being behind or not fast enough or, you know, that kind of that. And that's when you're not present, right? So.
Let's now move into the Win the Day rocket round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one?
Okay, let's do it, James.
Number 1, what quote inspires you the most?
I would say, besides the one that Nana that I gave in the beginning of our interview about being someone's shot of whiskey versus everyone's cup of tea, I would say my second favorite quote is, you know, this is a classic, but I do love Maya Angelou's quote. People remember how you made them feel, not what you said or what you did.
Number 2, morning coffee or evening wine?
Evening wine. Not a coffee drinker.
Number 3, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Trust yourself.
Number 4, what book do you gift the most or that contributed most to the mindset you have today?
Ooh, gosh, my friend Tamsin Webster has a book called The Red Thread Method, and I gift it all the time because it really helps content creators, authors, speakers, marketers, anyone trying to convey a message when you have all your ideas and you're swimming around. How do I communicate this in a way that moves hearts and minds? She has this beautiful method that just helps you get to your through line argument just locked and loaded. She's great.
Number 5, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Being loud, talking fast, and being too much. Now I get paid to do that.
Yeah, funny how the world works.
I got bullied in middle school, and now it's working out great.
Yeah, take that, high school friends. Yeah. Number 6, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
That it is the greatest teacher and that the phoenix will always rise from the ashes. I mean, every dumpster fire, it yields your superpower and shows you the way every time. It's crazy.
Number 7, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Jesus.
Number 8, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Does my husband count? No.
Yeah. Any specific tasks that he does?
My husband, he calls himself the fix-it man. Whatever's on fire, he just will fix it. It doesn't matter. It could be software, clients, money, you know, the game plan, creative. He can shoot video. He can program. He's just a jack of all trades.
Perfect. We all need one of those. Yeah. We've got to clone him. Number 9, share one thing on your bucket list.
Bucket list would probably be, actually, you know what I want to do? I want to go to Australia.
Perfect. If you're watching this and you're in Australia, bring Erin out to come and speak at your company. I think
there's
that'd be
one
perfect.
in the mix that I think we're going to get.
Oh,
hopefully.
yes.
Yeah, there's one pending.
Perfect. And last question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
Always, always, always start the day with gratitude and prayer every day. No matter what, no matter how cranky, how late, at least 2 minutes of just thankful for waking up today. Air in my lungs. I could feel my heart beating under my hand, look around, take it in, and just what a beautiful day to be alive.
Well, Sam. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Erin, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at mrs.erin.king, grab a copy of her book on Amazon, and take your free energy exam at theenergyexam.com. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Thank you. What a pleasure, Erin. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, James.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.